So I think, Dr. Kirk, are you ready? So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Joel Kirk.
Hey. Hello everyone, can you all hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up from some of you? Great, at the back especially, fabulous. Okay, I'm Joel Kirk. Please feel free to call me Joel. You don't need to call me Dr. Kirk. Joel is absolutely fine. Thank you, Pio, for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here and see so many of you in person. Some of you I've known for about 2 years now, virtually, and it's great to be here, kind of serendipitously, for this wonderful, wonderful project. Before I start my presentation, I really have to thank the British Arts Council and the Connections Through Culture Thailand team, without whom this wouldn't have been possible. So a huge shout out to them. The presentation that I'm going to give today is one that is very important for me because it's one that features this coalescing of lots of what have otherwise been quite disparate ideas in my compositional and artistic aesthetics. So, if you'll forgive me, I've actually written down most of what I want to say because it's the first time that I've given this presentation. But we're going to have some visual images, we're going to have some pieces to listen to, and I'm going to try and deliver this presentation in somewhat of an engaging way. So it's not just going to be me looking down at a piece of paper, not engaging with you all throughout. So, without further ado, approaches to cross-cultural composition expressing the mechanical and pastoral in Manchester and Bangkok. And I'm actually going to move a little bit closer to you all just so that it's not feeling like I'm at the back of the room and that you're completely on the other side. Okay, hello once again, I'm Joel Kirk. I'm a composer and teacher from the city of Manchester in the United Kingdom, where I spent the first 22 years of my life. And yes, as you can see, I do support Manchester City rather than Manchester United. Sorry, not sorry for that one. As a trumpet player by trade, I grew up in the rich brass banding culture of Northern England. And at the age of 18, with brass bands as my passion originally, I chose to study at Huddersfield University with the famous cornet player Philip McCann. And it was here that I began composing, tutored by the brilliant Aaron Cassidy, who some of you might have heard of. Although I quickly realised that my abilities on the trumpet weren't such as to make me a living, unfortunately, I quickly found an aptitude and enjoyment for composition, which was nurtured by Aaron and the Huddersfield faculty. So much so that it became the primary focus of my undergraduate music degree, followed by a specialist master's in music composition. I was then fortunate enough to be accepted on the composition PhD program at the University of Buffalo, and there I studied for 4 years under David Felder and Jonathan Goloff. I really enjoyed my time there. Buffalo hosts a vibrant new music community with a rich history, and for me it was the place where I discovered my identity as a pastoral industrial composer, but more on that later. Whilst at Buffalo, I also discovered my love for teaching. I had previously never been interested in teaching until I got there, but I was quickly thrown in at the deep end, teaching undergraduate music theory, I think was the composition course that I taught first. But I had no syllabus, mentoring or resources to draw from. So it was a baptism of fire as a teacher, but a whole other side of my musical expertise came out that I never knew really existed. And after finishing my PhD in music composition, I decided to continue my studies in music pedagogy and decided to go to the best place to do it. So after finishing my PhD in composition, I decided to go to the University of Cambridge. And this week is actually the last week of my course there as a music teacher. So many thanks to the university and my mentor, Jenny Francis, for supporting me in being here. I have to give a good shout out to them. So my year at Cambridge has really changed my outlook on composition and overall musicianship. And I very much now consider myself as much a teacher as I do a composer, if not more so. If you come along to my improvisation workshop and composition masterclass tomorrow, you'll get to hear more about my teaching work and participate in some activities exploring strategies for composing with improvisation. Anyhow, introductions over for now, and on to my work. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from the city of Manchester in the United Kingdom. There's a picture here. in which I resided for the first 22 years of my life. And for reference, I'm now 27, so 22 years for me is rather a long time. Like many northern cities in the United Kingdom, Manchester enjoyed a boom of industry in the Industrial Revolution of the late 19th and early to mid 20th centuries. Its main exports were cotton and coal, hence its nickname even now, Cottonopolis, it's often known. And these were transported across the country via its abundant networks of canals and railways. Despite its prosperity, Manchester became a place of noisy factories, choking smog, and inherent poverty amongst its population. After the end of the Industrial Revolution, the sudden lack of industry weighed heavily on the prospects of the city, with many areas falling into disrepair. Its poverty continued, with crime in the city being at an all-time high right through into the millennium. However, through the early 21st century thus far, which encompasses my lifetime, areas of Manchester have transformed from post-industrial wasteland to thriving hubs of gentrified activity. In particular, the moving of the British Broadcasting Corporation, or the BBC as it's often known, from London to Manchester in 2013 brought an influx of media interest to the city, with the region of Salford in Manchester often now being labelled as Media City. The picture shown here is one of my favourite cityscapes of Manchester. Down below you see the red brick of the old mills and factories which have now been renovated into places of dwelling. These are mired in the canals and the train lines which at one point would have transported the goods of the cotton and coal industries, but now they're generally used for tourism and for recreational use. And this sits below, as you can see above, the gentrified skyscrapers, the apartments and the business complexes of this now really cosmopolitan and metropolitan area. However, if you look in the distance, you can see in the background of the landscape the rolling Lancashire moors and the hills of the Pennines. Pastoral Manchester offers a tranquil contrast to the bustling urban core, with an array of green spaces and scenic countryside surrounding the city. The nearby Peak District and Pennines provide breathtaking landscapes for perfect hiking, cycling and outdoor recreation. And within the city, parks like Heaton Park and Fletcher Moss Botanical Garden offer lush retreats with sprawling lawns, wooded areas and picturesque gardens. The River Irwell and the canals weave through Manchester, adding to the city's pastoral charm with serene waterways and wildlife habitats. And the sudden juxtaposition of Manchester's industrial city centre with its pastoral surroundings has always been of great inspiration to me as a composer, and I've long grappled with the problem of trying to represent both in my work. I now want to show you two previous pieces of mine that characterise this stylistic dichotomy in my work thus far. The first is this chamber sextet, Shoals of Sardines, of Dolphins, of Sharks, which I wrote for the Barcelona Modern Ensemble back in 2022. It's inspired by a poem by the queer poet Nicole Brossard, which reads thus: "Then I find myself turning my back on the planets, depending on the sounds of intimate speech or to say farewell following the light. Shoals of sardines, of dolphins, of sharks. Struggling with the dawn drowning, I find myself retracing the flow of time, gaze blurred by the breakneck speed of the universe." As a fellow queer artist, I was inspired by the sensuous nature of Brossard's poetry and its visceral depiction of an ethereal yet subterranean oceanic world. I couldn't help but think about the murky canals and dark, dank tunnels of Manchester's waterways when I was conceptualising this piece. Now, I'm not usually one for literal text painting when inspired by poetry. However, the image of a shoal of fish floating distantly in the sunlight was highly influential to my formulating its initial sound world. I wanted to capture this ephemeral complex of rhizomatic activity, a vast simulacral microcosm of self-similar reference, through taking a single gesture and extrapolating it across the whole ensemble. The piece begins solely with the sound of quiet teeth tones on the clarinet, an effect that saxophonist Joshua Hyde quite comically refers to as al dente, like the pasta. The resultant sound is extremely high in pitch, however delicate and soft, rather than shrill and piercing as is found at louder dynamics. The first 2 minutes of the piece, as you will hear, feature the development of these gestures into an ethereal, zephyrine, aeolian sound world. That is not to say, however, that these gestures are the main object of focus in the piece here, but more an entry point or antechamber from which further exploration of a complex sound mass begins. Let's hear the beginning of the piece now. Thus far, I've only been discussing the opening A section of the piece, which you've just heard, which is reorchestrated in a truncated version of itself halfway through, as you can see here, marked A prime. It's contrasted by much more active, frenetic B material, which you'll hear in a second, a shark disturbing the shoal of fish, if you will, which is initially presented highly densely across the ensemble, then again with a clearer sense of polyphony between the instruments, and then once more as originally intended in one line manifested as a piccolo solo right at the end of the piece. The C section was added much later as a point of repose amongst the continually active polyphony of the A and B material. The C section features blocks of homogeneous sound mass demarcated by repeated chords on the piano. In terms of duration, the opening A section is the longest that you've just heard, driven entirely by the scope of individual gestures forming larger sculptures of ethereal orchestration, as you just heard. The following frenetic B section is half the length, with each successive section increasing in duration to close, and the final piccolo solo being almost as long as the opening. Due to the highly active nature of the first two-thirds of the piece, the comparatively static C section is naturally perceived as being much longer than it really is, with a number of listeners already commenting to me that it felt like the longest section of the piece by far, although it is not. Similarly, the piccolo solo appears as quite a refreshing resolution to the C material and is perceived as much shorter than the other sections of the piece, so the opposite there. This subversion of real time and perceived duration, alongside the continual reformulation of material, ties into Nicole Brosside's fixation on retracing the flow of time and space, not only in the chosen passage from Ardo, which I read to you, but also the entire text. The book is saturated in a sense of uncanny familiarity from start to finish, this perpetual state of déjà vu as the text appears to elegantly eclipse itself, a state of simultaneous forward and backward movement, which I've tried to capture in the listening experience of this piece. Like matter entering a black hole, the materiality of sonic information circles itself in a spiral fashion towards the final gesture in the piccolo and piano at the end, which sounds quite comical. It unfurls as it does so, at which point it passes the event horizon and blinks out of existence with a final blip. But enough talk for now. Let's hear the rest of the piece. Great, thanks for listening. And I have to commend there, at the end, the stunning piccolo playing of Clara Silero, who plays piccolo for the Barcelona Vidal Ensemble. She was fantastic. She was game to do it the whole way through. It was a really, really great performance. Okay, so with its intentional ethereal beauty and direct programmatic depiction of natural phenomena, I consider this piece to be inherently pastoral in nature. However, whilst working on this piece, I was also revising a percussion trio of mine, which was quite different in sound world. Highly industrial and mechanical, this piece is limited to unpitched, small percussion only in terms of instrumentation. I wanted to see what I could do with the most restricted array of resources possible in a piece, ultimately manifesting in a cowbell, woodblock, tom-tom and brake drum for each player. At the time of originally writing this piece for line-upon-line percussion back in 2017, I think it was, I was also very interested in writing for polytempic, multi-channel click tracks. In doing so, I found that my compositional interest shifted from the exploration of the instruments to the interaction of the performers themselves in various circumstances. The piece contains areas that are click track guided, polytempic, unison and aleatoric. Unlike Shoals of Sardines, which was inspired by Manchester's canals and waterways, I was instead drawn to the mechanical sounds of Manchester's mills and factories when revising my percussion trio for Talajon Percussion to perform in 2023. Writing these two pieces simultaneously, I somewhat felt like two composers rolled into one, and was concerned that my artistic aesthetic wasn't able to crystallize anywhere between these two sound worlds. Let's listen to some of percussion duo Moitier's performance of the percussion trio. I think we'll listen to the second half of it today. Okay, thanks for listening. One moment, please. So, as you can hear, the percussion trio sits in quite an alien world to shoals of sardines, of dolphins, of sharks. They feel like they're pieces by two different composers, despite both pieces having their merits. But quite a lot of people have remarked, when heard back to back, they sound like quite disparate works. The solution to surmounting this artistic problem that I have had for quite a while emerged last year when Pia approached me to ask if I wanted to be part of a cross-cultural initiative between the UK and Thailand as part of the British Arts Council's Connections Through Culture initiative. Long story short, we were successful in our application and the SonicSculpt Project was born, a week-long project which would explore sonic diversity through pastoral and industrial cultures from Manchester and Bangkok. On my end, the project includes a portrait concert of my work this Saturday. Please come along. I was commissioned to write a new quintet for the concert, which I have, but I was also drawn to the uniqueness of this opportunity to curate a selection of my own pieces which would purposefully explore this mechanical pastoral dichotomy in my music. So, I set to work rewriting and revising a number of my previously existing pieces to be included in the programme. More on that soon. First, I wanted to talk about the cultural links between Manchester and Bangkok. Manchester and Bangkok, despite being located in different parts of the world, share several similarities. Both cities are significant economic and cultural hubs within their respective regions. As aforementioned, Manchester, a key city in the United Kingdom, has a rich industrial history and it's known for its contributions to the Industrial Revolution. Similarly, Bangkok is Thailand's capital and a major centre for commerce, industry and finance in Southeast Asia. Both cities also face challenges with urban congestion and pollution. Manchester has been addressing issues related to air quality and the need for sustainable development, while Bangkok grapples with high levels of air and water pollution due to the rapid urbanisation and industrial growth. Additionally, both cities boast vibrant cultural scenes, with Manchester being renowned for its music, sports and education, and Bangkok being celebrated for its temples, cuisine and dynamic street life. The blend of historical significance and modern development makes both cities pivotal to their national identities and influential on the global stage. Now, like Manchester, Bangkok is a city that saw enormous cultural and economic shift through the late 19th century to the present day. Bangkok's pastoral history is deeply intertwined with its development as a city, shaped by rivers, canals, and lush landscapes. Historically, the Chao Phraya River, am I pronouncing that correctly? Is that correct? I'm getting a thumbs up, excellent. And its extensive network of canals played a crucial role in the city's agricultural and transportation systems. These waterways supported rice paddies, orchards and vegetable gardens that form the backbone of Bangkok's economy and sustenance. Traditional wooden houses on stilts line the banks, with residents relying on boats for commuting and trade. The city's early growth was marked by a harmonious blend of urban life and rural simplicity, where green spaces and water bodies were integral to daily living. In 1850, Bangkok's population was just 100,000, with its industry being limited to mostly agricultural produce. From 1850 until 1920, Bangkok's population quadrupled to around 400,000, and as Manchester had cotton and coal as its main exports, Bangkok had rice and teak originally. After the overthrow of absolute monarchy in 1932 and World War II in the early 1940s, Bangkok's population tripled again to 1.2 million, roughly by 1960. 1946, that's wrong, that should be 1.2 million. 1960 is 2.1. New policies of bureaucratic even capitalism revolutionized the Thai economy. And from the 1950s until the 1990s, the industrial market exploded with digital manufacturing, electronics and tourism joining agriculture as the city's main exports. This came with enormous financial benefits to the city, but also, like Manchester, inherent issues of overpopulation, pollution and poverty. The above pictures of Sathon Road, one of the busiest streets of Bangkok throughout its history, clearly shows this shift in population size, the city scale, and agricultural to industrial commerce. That being said, pastoral remnants of Bangkok offer serene oases from the city's frenetic pace. Parks such as Lumpini Park and Benjakiti Park provide lush oases in the heart of the city, featuring expansive lawns, tranquil lakes, and shaded pathways perfect for relaxation and recreation. Just outside the city, the Bong Kashau area, often referred to as Green Lung of Bangkok, is a verdant expanse of mangroves, orchards and cycling trails offering a peaceful retreat into nature. The Chao Phraya River and its network of waterways further enhanced Bangkok's pastoral charm. This gentrification of both natural and artificial urban green spaces into city life is shared by both Bangkok and Manchester. In both cities, artists have also long captured these socio-cultural and socio-economic shifts. One of Manchester's most famous artistic names is the painter L.S. Lowry. Lowry's paintings are renowned for their distinctive portrayal of industrial scenes and urban landscapes in mid-20th century England. Characterised by his use of muted colours and a unique style of depicting human figures, often referred to as matchstick men, as you can see down here. Lowry's work captures the essence of the working class environment. His art poignantly reflects the gritty reality of industrial life, imbued with a sense of melancholy and social commentary. Despite their sombre tone, Lowry's paintings evoke a profound connection to the everyday lives and resilience of the people he depicted. All scenes, pastoral and industrial alike, pandustrial, that's a new word, are somewhat blurred by a filter of grainy smog permeating Lowry's artistic camera lens. When writing my commission piece for this project and revising my previous works, I found myself returning again and again to Lowry's art, with many of his paintings making their way into my programme notes. Given that I knew this concert would be taking place here in the River City Gallery, a hub of some of Bangkok's most current and exciting artists, it only seemed fitting to name this cycle of pieces after L.S. Lowry, with the concert being an installation of sorts of musical work paying homage to his sensitive depiction of the struggles of industrial Manchester, struggles that have been shared here in Bangkok. This piece explores a range of both, well, these pieces even, not just this piece, a range of both pastoral and industrial themes and soundscapes, with the final commission piece, Sinkhole, which will be the last piece that you hear in the concert, being what I think is my first piece which successfully manages to bridge the gap between my two sound worlds, a true mechanical pastoral piece. It's only through my research into connections to culture in the industrial and pastoral worlds of Manchester and Bangkok that it has been possible for me to artistically overcome this boundary. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy Saturday's concert. Thank you. And just quickly, I just want to wrap up by advertising. Tomorrow I'm leading an improvisation workshop and a composition masterclass. Please come along, and you don't just have to participate as an audience member. It's great for you to get involved. We're going to do some body percussion. I'm also going to make you sing, so please make sure you've got your voices ready. And please bring your instruments with you if you have them. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then obviously we have the concerts as well on Saturday. If we have time now before Pia Watt's presentation, we can have some questions, or we can just have some informal break time. You can come and speak to me. There's a QR code there. If you want to email me or message me via my website, please feel free to do so. It's an honour to be here, and it's been great to present to you all today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirk, for Joel. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Joe, for wonderful presentation. You know, like sometimes for me as a composer and curator, it's always great to, you know, like this is kind of great ideas to create music, right? Like kind of like different from like just compose music from musical elements, but have like something reflect to our society, industrial culture, pastoral culture. So thank you for that. Any questions? Please.
So you said the percussion piece was aleatoric. How did that work practically?
Sure, should I use the
Yeah,
microphone?
please.
So the question was, the percussion piece was aleatoric, how did that work practically? So the piece began with click tracks, so all of the performers at the beginning were playing at different speeds at the same time. And then partway through the piece, when the texture became really, really frenetic and complex, as you heard, the click tracks stopped. And then it was completely free time, aleatoric, using similar material that they'd already been working with earlier in the piece, and they were instructed to improvise. So you heard this very clean shift from click track guided, quite complex material. Then they started improvising. And the lead player then gives cues, and she gave a cue. That's when they started doing the rolls, getting louder on the instruments. She gave another cue, they just moved to the tom-toms. And then the next bit was all notated. I think the tempo's about crotchet equals 100. And that's when she gave a cue, they had that crescendo, and they were in, and they were together. So yeah, so there was very much this smooth guiding from click track led to aleatoric and then to performer led sort of unison playing in that piece.
So the lead player, the cues, did she have like a certain selection of cues to select from, or did she have like complete?
So the piece has a score that has all the cues marked on. So it's indicated in the score that player 1 is the lead player. And then they give all the very clear cues when to move to the next sort of item of material in the piece. I can send it to you if you want, if you like the score. I think it's on my website, but yeah, if you want it, feel free to ask. Yeah. Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
I'm music director from Japan. First piece you use an internal print method on piano.
The Super Bowl on the piano.
I have a question. What would you do if you couldn't use the internal technique? Because almost Japanese concert players cannot using the internal print on piano.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this question of the question was in the Shoals of Sardines piece, I make use of a Super Bowl on the piano strings, on the low piano strings, to create that low sort of rumbling sound. And the question was, what if the piece has to be played in a space where you're not allowed to use sounds inside the piano? This is something that comes up quite a lot. So perhaps if an ensemble was to try and program this piece in a space where they couldn't use a Super Bowl inside the piano, I think maybe I might just ask them to play a note cluster a couple of times, maybe like a quintuplet note cluster in the low register of the piano, maybe the bottom 3 notes getting louder. Yeah, but that is something sometimes we do have to grapple with as composers. Sometimes we write a piece in a certain way, and then the situation that it's performed in doesn't allow certain techniques to be possible, especially on an instrument like the piano, where a performer can't always carry around their own instrument. Yeah, I think in that situation I'd ask for something similar that is practical. It's a good question. Yeah, thank you.
ถามนะครับถ้าอยากถามเป็นภาษาไทยเดี๋ยวแปลให้นะครับไม่มีปัญหา
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was it's a great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And so my question is that I see that you wrote a lot of instrumental chamber music, and I think your idea, the pastoral and industrial, is very interesting. Do you have plan to develop it into like another medium, or maybe your dream project that you haven't realized yet? Do you have like any a plan for develop this kind of ideas further?
Yeah, so in terms of developing these kind of sound worlds, obviously this, as I mentioned, the commission piece for this project, Sinkhole, for me feels like quite a breakthrough piece, because it's the first one I've written that has spaces of pastoral and industrial material, and then spaces where they're fused together as well. I think next steps, I'd love to explore similar sound worlds as the ones you'll hear in the concert with a larger size ensemble. So a large-scale wind band or an orchestra or something like that, or brass band. I've written a lot for brass bands before. Also, I want to get more involved with the use of electronics. So far I've used sort of fixed media and things like click tracks a lot as well. I'd love to write a piece with polytempic click tracks for a large ensemble, but that's something that's sort of far off in the ether. I'd like to make use of more live electronics. I think that's sort of a short-term goal that's feasible in sort of nearby future pieces. I think with this industrial, mechanical, pastoral influence, live electronics is sort of the place to go next, I think, for me. I think you'll hear more about that in Cubewatt's presentation, at least from some of the things I saw. I might be wrong, but thank you. Good question.
Any more questions? Oh, please.
Yeah, just thank you so much for giving this presentation. In my work, I'm also interested in these dichotomies between anthropomorphic and natural sound worlds, I guess. And I just want to hear more about, because you talked about structure and such, and I want to hear more about how you characterize the different sound worlds between, pastoral, the dichotomy between pastoral and industrial environments.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think certainly in these two pieces, the pastoral piece was certainly much more programmatic, which if you think traditionally about what we consider to be pastoral music, is often the case. There is some kind of direct programmatic reference, certainly in a lot of romantic programmatic music, where this kind of pastoral themes really started to emerge. While I think the mechanical side of things with like the percussion trio, in that sense, the piece is much more about the relationship between the performers and the materials of the piece without necessarily any kind of external reference. I think obviously at the time I was thinking about sort of factories and repetition and the sounds of industry and metal and wood. But I wouldn't necessarily say in the percussion trio I'm trying to depict the sounds of a factory. It's more about this idea of sort of like the production line, lots of people working together, contributing different actions to produce this cohesive whole, which I think is what you hear in some of the textures in the percussion trio. And so in a lot of the pieces that I've revised, and obviously the commission piece for the concert you'll hear on Saturday, I've been thinking about ways to sort of bridge the gap between these ideas. So in some pieces you'll hear, certainly the commission piece, textures which sort of pass through both sound worlds and try to combine them.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
We have some time for maybe one more question. Anyone wants to? Great. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thanks for having me.